Thank you, Chairnet, and welcome everyone to the third e-learning community focused on minimum allotment councils and employment. We are delighted to have you here with us today. We are delighted to have our guest speaker, Sue Babin, here, who will introduce herself in just a bit. Before we get started, I would like to do a few housekeeping announcements. Number one, we did last week ask for specific requests for CART or ASL, offering a reminder that if we do not receive any requests for accommodations, that we will cancel the service for our final session next week. So please, if you do need ASL and CART, send me a quick message through the chat or Chairnet just to confirm that service, okay? Number two, let's do a quick recap of what we've talked about so far. So for the first session at the beginning of June, we had Dr. Barawi here who talked about engaging with employment first partners in the state, whether that be providers, whether that be families, whether that be state entities, to really leverage those partnerships and move the needle on employment, right? As we all know, working in silos is definitely a barrier. We've all experienced it within our neck of the woods, and we know that partnering with folks, identifying manners for collaboration really does elevate those outcomes and only strengthen our efforts as a whole. The second session last week, we heard from the California Council, we heard from Tanya and Bridget, and we learned how to leverage, to really work through the legislative process with stakeholders to ensure that we were able to get some of this employment first legislation at the table in our states. We learned about tips and tricks and really champions to identify that we could work with, right? To use them as allies, right? In the state legislature. And then we also learned about some processes and barriers that we need to consider, right? As a council, if we do decide to work on that legislative aspect of the work that we do. Today, in our third session, we are going to hear from Sue Babin. We have been working together for the last few years, actually, of the DETAC. And quite frankly, I was just amazed when I learned about this self-employment project in Rhode Island. I have had the honor of actually going on a site visit and meeting so many of these advocates and families who said, when there wasn't a way, we made a way. We established partnerships, and now our sons or daughters and family members are in their own self-employment. They run their own businesses. And so I am just so delighted and honored to welcome Sue here. She will introduce herself a little bit, talk more about her role, and then she's going to take a deep dive into the elements of developing and implementing a successful self-employment project. So Sue, I will turn it over to you. Oh, and then one more thing, of course, after Sue gives her 30 or 40-minute presentation, we welcome questions, we welcome comments, and Sue, for your purposes, we have some councils here, but what we also said is bring in your VR, bring in your DD, bring in your partners here. And so some folks like Nebraska brought in their partners today at the table, which I think really demonstrates the goal of working collaboratively, right, when it comes to employment. So Sue, I know you're pumped and you're ready. I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here to talk with people about something that I'm just really psyched about, what we've managed to accomplish here in Rhode Island in just 5 years. 5 years ago, self-employment really was not an option for folks with disabilities. People were going to VR that had expressed an interest in maybe starting their own business, but weren't getting some support, and weren't getting support either from the state DD office. So the focus here in Rhode Island, and again, you know that we have a consent decree, has really been on jobs for people. So today I'm going to talk about how we started and where we are today and what's going to be happening next. I think what we've managed to organize here in Rhode Island is something that any state could replicate, and we'd be glad to help you to do that, because the benefits specifically for folks with disabilities and their families are just incredible. I started my career in the field of developmental disabilities working for the state, the Office of Developmental Disabilities. I worked there for 32 years. I ran the Office of Quality Assurance and Special Projects, and I was also the waiver manager. I left that job to go to work for the DD Council. So I went from working for a state agency to working directly for a state advocacy agency, different role. And I've been working specifically on a number of policy issues in projects that relate to employment, because employment is one of the major goals here of the Rhode Island Developmental Disabilities Council. So let's get going. Next slide, please. All right, so just a couple of pictures here. So on the left is Alton. Alton is an incredible artist. He's just totally amazing, the work that he can do. He's a portrait artist. Up at the top is Karen. She is an author, a children's book author. She has a child that wears leg braces. And what she wanted to do, because her child was being bullied in school, she came up with, and Karen herself had to wear leg braces when she was a young girl. She decided to make her child be the focus of this story and to be a mermaid. And so the mermaid goes on all sorts of really cool adventures. And so now her daughter is kind of like a star because she's the central figure in this particular book. At the bottom is Becca. And Becca has a greeting card business. It takes her a half a day to make one greeting card. She doesn't care. She loves making greeting cards, and her tagline is opening smiles every day. So those are just a couple of people. I'm going to show you a few more as we go on. So the next slide, please. That's just me. My more specific contact information will be at the back. So we can go to the next slide. What we're going to talk about, how we started here in Rhode Island, some benefits, a few challenges, the key program components that we have. I'm going to specifically talk about building community partnerships and funding sources, because those are areas that I think make our projects stand out, that different from what other states may have, and then some lessons learned. Next slide. All right, so why did we start? All right, so on the right is Katie Lowe. Katie is a young gal whose mom had come to me back in 2016 because Katie loves music and she wanted to be a DJ. She had over 1,000 songs in her computer, and she had approached Voc Resources to try to get some support for starting a business. And it wasn't happening. And so Katie and her mom basically came to the DD Council and said, how can you help us? And so we asked the VR, well, what's the problem? Why aren't you helping this gal out? And they basically said, well, how do we know that she's serious? Maybe she needs to take some business development classes. And so Katie did sign up for some business development classes that were offered by the Small Business Administration, but they were very complicated. And so I said to myself, well, you know what? I think I want to take the classes. I started taking some classes to kind of see what people were learning. And I saw that the material on the screen was a little too complicated. They didn't use graphics. They didn't break down the terms and the words into simple terms. And so we approached the Small Business Administration here and an agency called the Center for Women in Enterprise, CWE, that's on the screen. And we asked them, hey, can we adapt your training curriculum to use to help folks with disabilities to become successful entrepreneurs? And we'll hire you guys to be the training instructors. And so they said yes. So that's basically what happened back in 2016 and 2017. We've been under a consent decree here since 2014. So the focus has been since 2014 on employment opportunities for people with disabilities. But yet self-employment really wasn't thought of as a viable option for customized employment back then. Today, it clearly is, and I'll show you how. So we started a small project in 2017 with about three or four individuals. We helped them out with some business resources, and then news quickly spread that the DD Council is doing some work to help people to learn how to become successful entrepreneurs. At that point, we were approached by the Department of Labor and Training, which is our state agency responsible for job training funds, and they had created an initiative that was focused on target populations, one of which was people with disabilities. And so I submitted a grant. I got the grant. It was only for $150,000. And we've been funded every year since that time by the Department of Labor and Training to run we basically run 3 rounds of training a year, which I'll go into a little bit more detail. The next slide. So why self-employment? I love this picture of Fred. This is Freddie on the right. Look at his smile. He's an artist. That's a gallery where he had a showing of his artwork. And he does really quite well with the work that he produces. Well, for some folks, traditional employment just doesn't work. And it may not be the best option. Many people can't find jobs. Some people apply for jobs, but yet they don't get the interview, or they go on the interview and then they don't get selected for the job. Sometimes people get laid off when the economy changes. There may be some difficulty with the work hours, or for jobs that may be full-time that people can't work. Sometimes transportation is an issue for people to be able to get to the job. So there's a lot of different reasons why traditional employment hasn't worked for some folks. What I love about self-employment is that it really matches the person's interests and their skills and their dreams with opportunities to do something that's really meaningful to them by launching their own small business and turning a hobby or a skill that they have into something that can make them some money. So the person is working at something that's really meaningful, as opposed to fitting into a particular job opening that may be out in the community. It's also an opportunity to demonstrate the value and contributions that people with disabilities can make to improve their own financial futures, and as well as local economies. Next slide, please. Well, what are the benefits? And I love this picture too of Brian. I'm going to love all of the pictures, so I'll tell you right now. That's Brian Barron. He's a photographer here in Rhode Island. I love the sweatshirt that he got, the Big Boss. He wears it out for different vendor events that he has out in the community. And in the front of the sweatshirt, it says the name of his business, Double B Photography, Brian Barron Photography. Well, what are the benefits? When I talk with folks with disabilities, this is what they tell me. People can work in a job that they really love and they get to control. It results in an increase in social skills and self-esteem because people are really proud to be the boss. They can't wait to show you their business card. When you meet somebody new, people always say to you, "So what do you do?" And when people with disabilities can pull out a business card and say, "Hey, I'm a business owner," that's a really cool thing. And people love that. Parents have told us repeatedly that the self-esteem increases in people as a result of a person being a business owner has just been immense. It's been absolutely incredible. Another benefit is people get to set their own hours. They get to, versus time scheduled by somebody else. They decide where they want to work, so where their place of employment is. Next slide, please. You work at your own pace. You don't have to answer to anyone else, and that's a benefit. There's opportunities for real community integration by the connections that people have to make with customers. When we run our classes, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, at every class, we ask people to give their elevator pitch. Tell us your name, tell us about your business. The first time that people talk about that, their heads are down. You can't hear them very well. By the 8th class, people are practically selling you the stuff that they have to offer within their business, because now they're used to that public speaking and they're better at it. That's a picture of Kevin. He's also an artist, and that's one of his works of art. He also is involved in a lot of gallery shows throughout the state. Another benefit of self-employment is clearly improved personal financial futures and the contribution that people make to local economic development, as I said on the previous slide. Next slide, please. Some more benefits. That's Michael on the right. Michael is the owner of two businesses. One is called the Red, White, and Brew Cafe, which, Amy, it's going to be the new location, is opening in 6 weeks. So we're really excited about that. He did so well with his first shop that he's actually moved to a different location within the state that's almost triple the area that he had in his first cafe. And Michael has another shop there called the Budding Violet, which is a retail store that sells gifts made by local entrepreneurs, including people with disabilities. So he has about 60 entrepreneurs that are sell their goods in the shop, and about 30 of those are folks with disabilities. So Mike, people have said, well, we don't have to worry about being laid off. We don't have to worry about losing our job or being fired. That's another real benefit of self-employment. There's also the education of the general public to actually see people out there selling stuff to the community. That's like incredible. And families are happy to see that their family member is involved with something that's really meaningful, that they're proud of, that they have an income, and they're really feeling good about themselves and being more independent. Next slide, please. Okay, so to be fair, I want to talk a little about some of the challenges. Operating any kind of a business is hard work. No one person can ever run a business by themselves. Nobody can do that. So when people say, well, I don't know if so-and-so can do that, yes, they can with the right support. And that's what we've done here, is figure out individually what type of support does a person need in order to run a successful business that's something of interest to them. But part of the challenge is finding people that can be part of a person's business team to handle those areas of the business that maybe they need some support in, such as could be accounting and financial management of the business. It could be tracking income, tracking expenses, things like that. So we need to find people that can be part of every person's business team. Most entrepreneurs also need ongoing technical support in some aspect of business development. What's the right business structure for me to open my business? How do I adapt given some of the things that have happened? And we saw this with COVID, where people were out there selling their stuff in a lot of different storefronts here in Rhode Island, and then the stores were on hold or closed. And so people had to shift to selling their stuff online. That was a big change for people. Securing resources for project funding and ongoing support needs. People need to have startup money to be able to buy the supplies, the small equipment, or support that they need. Not a lot of money, but just a couple of $1,000s to be able to get them going. Another challenge is with the SSI reporting, accounting and taxes. It's not that can't be solved, it can be solved, but there's a lot of myths out there, especially by family members, that people are going to lose their benefits if they have a job or if they have their own business. That's just not true. More money in the pocket of the individual basically means a better quality of life. Getting community agency support is also really key. We have a number of our agencies here that are starting to invest in their staff to train them about business development. We have a handful of agencies here that have 15 or more people from their agency that are entrepreneurs. So they've had to build the business expertise within their key staff so that they understand how to individually help each person with their business. I mentioned about the flexibility that you have to have as a business owner in order to meet the needs of your customer and come up with creative ideas for selling platforms such as online, or we do a lot of vendor marketplaces here where people can't, and we pay for those vendor marketplace fees. We supply the tent, the table, and people just show up with whatever it is within their business. but being able to provide that support so people can, and letting people know where those vendor events are really important. Next slide, please. So this talks about our key program components. Anybody can put together business classes. That's the easy part. Like I said, I started taking classes that was offered by the Center for Women in Enterprise, the Small Business Development Centers. I looked at stuff that was online through SCORE, and I took all of those things and basically figured out, well, what would be a package of programs that would make sense for someone from, so you want to be an entrepreneur, you have an idea, how do I develop that idea, all the way through, I need a completed business plan. So we have 8 business classes. It starts with, so you want to be an entrepreneur. The next one is the steps that are actually involved in running a business. The third one is, who is my target market? Because you're not going to sell everything that you have to everyone in the state. It's just not going to happen. After that, we talk about social media. We talk about marketing ideas, accounting, finances, community resources, developing an elevator pitch, and also developing a solid business plan. So those are our classes. In addition to the classes, and we're doing them by Zoom, we were meeting in person prior to COVID, but ever since COVID, we've run them by Zoom. Initially, we thought, well, that's not going to work. But you know what? It did. It takes care of transportation issues that people have, and it saves a lot of time. People are online, so we get to talk to people, and it has worked out well for us. We run a weekly entrepreneurs forum on Thursday afternoons from 3 to 4 o'clock. If anybody on this call would like to jump in on one of those calls, or if you want to attend one of our business classes, the business classes are on Tuesdays from 12:45 to 2:30, and the Entrepreneurs Forum is on Thursdays from 3 to 4 o'clock Eastern Time. If you'd like to come, put your email in the chat, or you'll see my email at the end. Shoot me off an email, and I'd be glad to send you the link. Because the best way for you to see this is to actually jump in on one of our classes, or to see our entrepreneurs at the forum, which is an open meeting where people are just talking about, well, what are you doing for marketing? Or what event is coming up this summer that we want to gear our products towards? We just had Mother's Day, we had Easter, we had Father's Day, now we got 4th of July coming up. So how do you gear your products to be able to attract customers, knowing that something in particular is coming up? We also have some speakers at the weekly forum. And I think it's this week that we're going to be talking about how to set up a storefront on Instagram and Facebook. We provide one-to-one business technical support. So all of the people who are instructors for those 8 classes that I mentioned can then provide individual business support to anyone that attends our classes to help them specifically with things like, the number one key thing is marketing. I got a great idea, but I need to get it out there. Like, remember the pet rock of the 80s? Like, I don't know who on the call will remember that, but some guy came up with an idea of selling a pet rock. He put it in this really cool box that you could have a pet rock, put it on your bureau, name the rock. You don't have to feed it. You don't have to take it to the vet. And the guy made over $1 million through creative marketing. So marketing is the key to having a good idea of something that the public may be interested in buying is number one, but then how you market that is the next thing that you really need to figure out. So people can get the business technical support from any of our instructors, and we have staff and peer mentors as well, individuals with disabilities who own their own businesses that are working with people to help inspire them and answer questions that they have, as well as staff. I have 3 key staff. They're all family members of people with disabilities who have businesses, which I have found to be extremely beneficial. They're all crackerjacks, and they understand the ins and outs of problems within businesses or issues that people have that have to be addressed. So they have been instrumental to me to running a successful program here. We also provide mini grants, anywhere from a low of $250 all the way up to $2,500 to be able to assist people to be able to buy the things that they need for their business. Sometimes it's just supplies. Sometimes it's, I want to belong to a chamber of commerce and pay that membership fee. Sometimes it's small equipment. So that's really important that we have that funding to be able to assist people. Another thing that we did here that was pretty creative, I think, is we hired a public relations agency that had nothing to do with human services, but everything to do with media relations in Rhode Island. Rhode Island is a small state. You can get anywhere within 50 minutes. We all know each other. We only have 4,000 adults with developmental disabilities who get services from the state agency, so we're really small. And we hired a communications firm called Communication Works. And what they do is do everything to publicize our project, what we're doing, and even more important, to get small stories about individuals that are business owners within our local newspapers as well as our major newspapers. We've had a number of articles in Providence Business News, which is the #1 newspaper in the state for anybody that owns a business. So we've had people be on the front page of that, talking about their business and what they have to offer. That helps our businesses to be able to get customers and be able to make money. So public and media relations is really important for the visibility of your projects, as well as the success of entrepreneurs. The ongoing support for selling platforms is something that we're working on now. I mentioned about the outside vendor shows. We have about 60 of them that we support people with disabilities to go to throughout the year. And we run our own event in November called Small Business Saturday Shop RI. And that is an event where we're actually sold out for this year. Right now, we have 162 vendors coming. 34 are people with disabilities. It's held at a major hotel in the state. And last year we had over 4,000 visitors come, and people made anywhere from $500 all the way up to one of our vendors that made $8,000. And by the way, the person that made the $8,000 happened to be a mother and son team that the young man has a disability. So it's really an integrated community event where TV stations come and you cannot tell who is a person with a disability and who is not. So it's really creative and awesome products that people can buy for the upcoming holiday season. It's held the Saturday after Thanksgiving, which is an event that American Express had come up with about 10 years ago to focus attention on small businesses versus big box stores or online shopping. The mini grants set up using Rhode Island DETAC Council federal funds or funds from the Department of Labor and Training. Kristen is asking that question. So those are our key program components. Can we go to the next slide? Building community partnerships. Well, there's traditional and non-traditional. I mean, you have state DD. Without having DD involved, we're not going to get people referred to our project. The same with VR. So we have very close relationships with state DD, and I'm in a unique position because I worked there for 32 years. So I do know all of the key folks that are within that office. We work very closely with our provider agencies to be able to talk with them and enlighten them about the benefits of self-employment. And one of the things I don't think I said was we have a speakers bureau with 18 folks with disabilities that all run their own businesses. And the Speakers Bureau goes around to different agencies talking about both employment and self-employment to inspire people to say, hey, wait a minute, I think I can do that too. And that helps with getting referrals to a project. We work really closely with individual and family advocacy groups. Our Advocates in Action is one of our strongest advocacy groups for individuals with disabilities, and we have a number of family groups in Rhode Island. We try to address the concerns and issues that people have so that they, again, see this as a viable option. Transition centers and high schools, you got to work with them, because what a great way to be able to get young people to start thinking about being an entrepreneur or learn the entrepreneur types of skills that are really important, such as teamwork, public speaking, communication, finances. Those are all things, whether the person starts a business or not, really important information for people to have. And lastly, DD councils. DD councils across the country are known for the great work that they've done to provide seed money for some specialized projects and to really get some things off the ground by identifying some gaps in services and focusing in on things that are really important to people with disabilities, and will help them to be integrated and valued members of a community. Next slide. Out of the box. Okay, so here's some things that we did. Most people would go to the state DD agency for funding for a job development type of program or self-employment program. We didn't. We went to the State Department of Labor and Training, which is our main state agency here in Rhode Island, and everybody has one. They may have a different name, but to use that agency that really focuses in on job development and training funds for anybody out in the community. And so we went to them to get our initial grant. We got that grant. The State Workforce Board is also involved with funding our project by making, they're the ones that actually approve the grant application. And they also designate other other funding for other kinds of target groups that are within the state. We work closely with the Small Business Administration. We continue to work with the Center for Women in Enterprise, as well as Small Business Development Center. Again, keep using their staff to do the training of those business classes. I mentioned we already have a PR agency, so I won't say that again. We have an entity here called Shop Local Rhode Island. It's an online entity that that entrepreneurs utilize to be able to sell. It's a selling platform to sell. There's hundreds of entrepreneurs that are on that, and we're involved with that organization as well to help promote the businesses of people that have gone through our project. And at this point, we've helped over 150 people in 5 years start up a successful business. I mentioned about Providence Business News. They're really the key newspaper here for anybody that has anything to do with small businesses. We're also working with them on a committee with our Secretary of State's office on developing a 3-part diversity, equity, and inclusion series that will be kicked off in September. So I'm really excited about that. Skills for Rhode Island's Future is an organization here in Rhode Island that was set up specifically to assist employers to be able to match them with qualified workers. They were never set up initially to work with folks with disabilities, but in the last couple of years, they have a new component called Workability, which is specifically for individuals that have disabilities. But they have hundreds of employers that are in their bank that are looking for qualified workers. So we work with them. Local chambers. We've been working with a few of our chambers within the state, chamber agencies within the regionalized chambers within the state, to educate their chamber members about the benefits of hiring folks with disabilities and using their members to do some employer informational interviews to help identify what their workforce needs are, and then kind of come up with some solutions to help match a potential worker or to do a business within a business. Obviously, keeping the governor and legislators educated about the benefits of self-employment is really key. And I mentioned already about Small Business Saturday. You can take a look at what we do by going to that website there. You'll see a bunch of different things and a really great video that shows all about Small Business Saturday. It's like, I think it's 5 minutes long. You have to see it to really get a sense of what I'm talking about. And that's another type of event that any state could easily replicate. Next slide, please. All right, well, I've already talked about most of our funding comes from job training funds from the Department of Labor and Training. We have also been received some funding from a small grant organization here in Rhode Island. It's not on this slide, called the Fogarty Foundation, but other potential funding sources for states are looking at workforce investment boards. Get to know these people. Find out what are their key areas that they're trying to focus in on for job training. Definitely want to talk to Voc Rehab, and all across the country, Voc Rehab is now looking at self-employment in a different way than what they were 10 years ago. State DD agencies are clearly looking at this as a creative way to account for people being in the workforce. DD councils can potentially provide some seed money out there for folks with different aspects of a self-employment project, and they need to be brought into the mix, as well as foundations. Next slide, please. So here's some lessons learned. As I mentioned, I started doing all of this just 5 years ago. Initially, I reached out to my buddy Doug Crandall over at Griffin-Hammis and asked him, who are the states that are doing this? I connected with NASD and said, who are the states that are doing this? I got on the links, email list for DD councils and said, who are the states that are doing this? And I made contact with those states and found out from them, what are they doing? What are the mistakes that they made? What are some of the lessons that they learned? What are the things that were successful for them? And so that's how we set up our project initially, by learning from other states, by hiring the right people. Besides having those 3 family members and peer mentors and a PR agency, I also hired the director of the New England Veterans Business Outreach Center as one of our key instructors for the business development series. Who better than that? A person that already knows, he's also an entrepreneur himself. He knows all about small businesses. He had been doing that. He also was an instructor for the Center for Women in Enterprise, as well as for the Small Business Administration. So by hiring the right people, that's a key to success. Addressing family concerns right from the get-go. Having those 3 family members on my team be able to talk with families about the benefits of people having their own business and addressing their concerns about reporting to Social Security and not losing benefits and all of those kinds of things has really been important. I think another thing that we learned, like I said, initially, when Katie started taking some of those classes, the material was difficult for her. It was difficult for me. I like to see a graphic up on the screen or a picture of somebody. That's going to be more interesting to me. So you want to make sure that you develop materials that are accessible. You have to network with key partners. Go to their business after hours or early morning breakfast. I just got invited this morning to a 7 o'clock meeting, 7 a.m. meeting next week with a group of business leaders to talk about our project here. Well, it's 7 a.m. That's when businesses meet. So I'm going. We always obtain feedback from our entrepreneurs after every round of the business series. And we run 3 of those series a year, 3 or 4 a year. What could we do better? What could be eliminated? What did you want to hear that maybe we didn't talk about? So that we build that into our curriculum for the next round. You have to be flexible. Like I mentioned with COVID, we went from in-person to online. So you got to go with the flow. The ongoing support for entrepreneurs. You can't just run classes and then expect people to be able to go out there and be successful. Some will, but it's the ongoing support and keeping people in the networking loop is what's key to helping folks to learn from one another and to be flexible themselves and to come up with new ideas. That's really key. You have to assist with helping people to figure out where are they going to sell their items. Is it online? Is it an online selling store? Is it a storefront? Is it that they're going to vendor shows? Is it that they're selling at other kinds of events in the community? Help them to do that. That's really important. And then lastly, publicizing your success stories so that more people know what it is that you're doing and also hear about the individual businesses and what people are selling. Next slide. So I think I wanted to close with this. This is Rachel Rasnick. She is an artist. Just look at that happy face. I mean, if that isn't a person that loves what she's doing, I don't know what is. And I love this comment that her mom made. Her mom is Karen. And what she said is this: self-employment has helped my daughter, Rachel, in so many positive ways. She has gained a pride and self-confidence that she never had before. Having her own business has also made her become much more social than she ever was. She loves talking to people about her paintings and selling her art at craft shows. She also loves teaching others how to paint. Having her own business has given her a real pride and motivation to be successful. She loves bringing happiness and joy to people through her beautiful and colorful paintings. And she does. We just hired Rachel to run a class for our Cross Disability Coalition, which is a community advocacy organization. And they had 20-something people come and each made a nice creative work of art that was taught by Rachel. Next slide, please. And here's Michael. So I showed you Michael before, but what I really love about this particular slide here is this is a picture of Michael before he opened his coffee business. That's in a day program and his staff didn't show up. And one of the staff actually sent this picture home to his mom. And it does say, I really don't understand why he never has staff here. And he's just sleeping on the floor because he was really, really bored. And this is Michael on the right at his store back in November. Look at the face. I mean, if that, again, this really says it all to me, that self-employment is just such an incredible opportunity for those people that may have a hobby or a skill that you could help them to turn into a business to be able to generate some income. Next slide, please. So here's my contact information, Sue Babin at riddc.org. That's my cell phone number. Call me anytime, 401-523-2300. And there's the DD Council's website, which has a tab on self-employment. We have a business directory with approximately 50. It's a growing business directory. We're just in the process of putting that together. We have 50 of our entrepreneurs that are in there, so you can see the range of different types of businesses that people have. You'll also see on this tab, the website, some videos that we've created for people, as well as some of the newspaper stories that have been happening here in Rhode Island throughout the past couple of years. And that's the last slide. And I guess at this point, I'll turn it back to Amy and open it up to some questions from people or comments.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sue. I think it's so important to understand the nuts and bolts, right, of creating such programs and the real outcomes, right, the impact that we have on folks and families. And it was bringing me back to the time that I was in Rhode Island visiting Red, White, and Brew, by the way. I got to have some coffee and some snacks too. And so many families saying, this was this person's, my child's former life, sheltered, no confidence, the inability to communicate. But when they helped unwrap those goals and support that person, every family member I remember talking to said, my child blossomed.
Mhm.
They have a sense of self-confidence like they never did, but they never had the opportunity when they were in a segregated program. They never had the opportunity to build skills and really understand what their goals and dreams were. And so I think in creating such a program, you know, you really do focus on that person-centered philosophy and make sure that person is the central focus of the process. And one more thing I want to add before we're opening it up to Q&A is, Sue, the other day we were talking, you said people are calling us now. People are reaching out to the council and they're wanting partnerships. And I want you to talk about that a little bit, because, you know, instead of the council doing outreach, now people are coming to you. And I think that is what, you know, an amazing goal that all of us should really think about. How do we position ourselves to be the ones that they're looking for, that others are reaching out to? And so can you please talk about that?
Yeah, you know, I mentioned that our Department of Labor and Training has been focusing in the last 5 years on underserved populations and targeting a set amount of money annually to entice agencies or organizations to submit proposals for underserved populations. The Skills for Rhode Island's Future group that I mentioned that initially started to help small businesses here in Rhode Island just received a huge $16 million grant from a combination from the federal government, as well as some money in state here from Commerce. And they want to assist small businesses with the business technical assistance that they need for marketing, business planning, setting up web pages, things like that. They contacted us like a couple of months ago and said, we want you to be a partner with us because you guys have done such a great job with entrepreneurs who happen to have disabilities. Are you interested? And I was like, that'll be a yes. Hello. Yeah. So what that project is all about is each business can receive up to $10,000 in individualized support. And we're going to be, we're approved as one of the major partners under that particular project. And so we're going to get over $100,000 just in technical support to be able to pass that on to our entrepreneurs. And so again, for people with disabilities to be seen in that light is just, I mean, isn't that the goal of why we do what we do? And, you know, like one thing I'll say back to Small Business Saturday, and you got to watch that video that I put up over there, is when I take the reporters around to see the different businesses, I take them around to see a lot of different people, veterans, minorities, folks with disabilities, other entrepreneurs in the community. And I don't say, and this is a veteran-owned business, or this is a business. I don't say any of that. When they are ready to leave, they're like, hey, Sue, you didn't show us the folks with disabilities. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did. They don't see them. And so to me, that's like the greatest gift, because what they saw was businesses. And that's what we want the world to see with people first, right? This is people with businesses. So it's really key. So I'm really excited about, that partnership with Skills for Rhode Island's Future and Department of Labor and Training would not have happened if we didn't have the statewide visibility that we've had through the newspaper articles and stuff. So they're reaching out to us, and they're not going to know about you if you're not visible. So you have to figure out ways. You got to network with them. You got to go to their 7 o'clock meetings or their after-hour meetings, whatever it is, you got to go. And you got to be visible in their newspapers or in places that they go to, so that they know who you are and they will see you as a potential partner in the future. Thanks for bringing that up, Amy. I forgot to mention that as I was talking on that slide that Skills was on.
Problem. I was like, oh, she has to tell that story because it's so incredible, you know. So let's open it up to a Q&A. You have questions, you have comments, please, folks, unmute and ask the expert. She is here and ready to answer those questions. Let's see. Look on my ping here.
Angie. Can you speak more, and maybe you did and I missed it, on that small pilot project?
Yes. So initially, what we did was we had 3 or 4 people, and I started going with some of those folks to some of the business classes that were offered by the Small Business Administration here. And then I adapted the curriculum to be able to work individually with those 3 or 4 people. And I specifically hired the gentleman that I mentioned that was the director of the Veterans Business Outreach, and he had been an instructor for Small Business Administration to teach the classes. So I didn't want me, a human service person, to teach those classes, although I have owned a small restaurant in my life, but I wouldn't consider myself a business owner. So I wanted the classes to be taught by someone that had business expertise. And so we ran a really small group with those folks. And we said, well, what else do you guys need? And they looked, well, we need startup money. Okay, where am I going to get that? And so I reached out to a small foundation, and I got a couple of $1,000s initially. And so I was able to provide people with some small mini grants. I think initially we did about $500 with people. And we found that that wasn't enough money. That really wasn't enough money. And so it depends on what stage of development somebody's at with respect to how much money they need. We had one young man that had a landscaping business. He already had lawnmowers, but he wanted one of those stand-up lawnmowers that's like $4,000, $4,000 or $5,000. So we ended up giving him $2,500. He had already been in business for a couple of years. So the pilot project was just to figure out how would we set up a program here. And we wanted to work out some kinks, learn from some people, have open conversations with family members, as well as staff from key agencies about, well, how is this working? What else do you think people will need? And that's where we also found out that people need that ongoing support on the selling platforms. Like, okay, yep, I'm making greeting cards, but how am I going to sell them? How am I going to get the word out to the general public that I have greeting cards?
Keep the questions coming, people. This is good stuff.
Okay, so this is Kristen with Nebraska. I'm going to piggyback on Angie's, and on that project, or when you talk about the startup money and the federal funding. So I'm hearing you say that it came from foundations and or the Department of Labor, because I know one of the concerns we've run into, and I'm glad Cheryl Matney with DETAC is on the call as well, because we realize that the federal funding that we get for the DD councils can't necessarily buy the equipment, or that there's some interesting parameters there that we're trying to navigate. So I guess what would, if we wanted to promote self-employment, but we can't fund the equipment, what would be a workaround that you would encourage councils to look at?
Okay, so when VR was saying no to people here, they were saying no because they were essentially saying, how do we know that the person is actually going to start up a business? Well, my initial response back to them was, hey, how much do you guys spend on VocaVals? Mm-hmm. And how many people have a VocaVal and they don't end up in a job? Well, they thought that was a smart answer on my part, but it did give them pause to think. And so they said, well, we'd be more comfortable knowing that the person took some small business development classes and had a business plan and presented that to us, and then we will give them some money. So I said, okay, well, I'm going to create that curriculum then. And so I will show you that people have taken the business classes. They will have a business portfolio, which is even bigger than a business plan, because that's one of the things that we create for people. So the business portfolio has all of the classes that they've taken, who their business team is, their elevator pitch, their marketing strategies, their business plan, their financial projections, and who did I say business team? Yeah, I did. Their business card, which I didn't say earlier. We also pay for developing a business card for people, helping them to create a Facebook page or a website. So all of those incidentals that people need to have a business. So the first place that I would tell people to go to is go to VR. To get one of our gals that has no, you didn't meet her, Amy. Renee owns a stained glass business. She just was able to receive $10,000 from VR here in Rhode Island. She had approached them before and they told her no. 2 years in a row, they told her no. After she went through our program, she got a yes. And just this Saturday is her open house at her first storefront. I'm like so psyched for her. Her work is like amazing, totally amazing. So VR is definitely a place. We have a foundation, and everybody has foundations in their own state. We approached the foundation and got a small, very small grant for $5,000 and said, we want to use the $5,000 to be able to give entrepreneurs anywhere from $250 to $500 to be able to buy their business supplies, because you're right, there's not a lot of options for being able to fund that. And by the way, I want to challenge the federal DD on that. And Amy and I have been talking about, well, why isn't that an allowable cost? People can take classes out in the community. They can have Y memberships. We want people to be integrated. So why wouldn't we fund business supplies? I mean, I don't get why the answer is no on that. And I'm kind of pushing that. So foundations and through our grant that we wrote to Department of Labor, I specifically said in the grant, I want to give people startup money of $1,000 to $2,500 to be able to support them with their businesses. So it's allowable costs within the Department of Labor funding.
Let me plug in your self-employment brief in the chat. Sue she drafted a self-employment brief for us this past year. So we'd love to share that in the chat. And then what we promised to do, we have some additional publications that we will send next week in a Word document. In addition to that, we also have a learning management system where you can sign in and access courses. There's also one on self-employment. One more thing that I'd like to say is that should any of the councils in this meeting need a individualized TA from Sue focused on self-employment, please reach out. We can dedicate some specific hours for one-to-one technical assistance with Sue as your designated subject matter expert. Okay, so if you need a couple of calls, if you need to troubleshoot, if you just need to get her on the phone for an hour and talk through a few elements, please let us know, because we can support that at the DETAC as a result of this e-learning community and the technical assistance that we provide. Any other questions or comments? We've got a few minutes left, so.
I see a question in the chat. Jonathan's asking, are you working with VR to incorporate your curriculum into pre-eds? Yes, as a matter of fact, I am doing that right now. I've been in touch with the director of VR here in Rhode Island, and yes, we are.
So exciting.
We're also working with a couple of other states around the country to help them get a self-employment project off the ground. I think it is smart to start with a pilot so that you can kind of work your own kinks out and really learn. We're happy to share our curriculum with you all. You know, it's something that every time I show it, we kind of tweak it a little bit to make it better. But, you know, we just want to help other states and other individuals with disabilities to be successful business owners. I'm just so excited about how many different people around the country are looking at this as an option, and people are taking them seriously about it and helping them to get a business off the ground. It's just really great work.
And AOD, ACL, they're acknowledging this program. One of the entrepreneurs, Alton, who Sue featured in the beginning of her presentation, was asked to speak on the President's Committee for Intellectual Disabilities. He was asked to talk about his business, to talk about some of the funding streams, and prepare specific recommendations for the president to consider as development for these programs. So there is so much potential, and there's being recognition at the national level. And so I'd like to take this moment to thank Sue for being here with us today. I think it was such an amazing presentation, especially when it comes to nuts and bolts and trying to figure out how that's going to look structure and funding. Again, we'd like to remind you that if you do need more one-on-one TA from her, to please reach out. And that the final session will be next week at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, where we have John Taylor focusing on employer engagement. How do we talk to employers? How do we make champions? How do we stay engaged with them to help advance our work under employment? So thanks to everyone for being here today. It was great to be here with you and to hear Sue. We're looking forward to staying engaged. See you next week. Sue, I'll stay on.
Okay,
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
thank you.